Rachel Baribeau here with SUNDAYSoul. This is a conversation for your soul. The goodness you feel on a Sunday, maybe Sunday brunch, that Sunday lunch that your grandma cooked, that great easy Sunday afternoon before you go into an awesome week. That's what we aim to give you every single week on SUNDAYSoul. We have musicians and football coaches and all sorts of actors, all sorts of neat people on here, people that I find to be really engaging and incredible in spirit. And my next guest is no different. Kevin Warren, the new commissioner of the Big Ten, my friend. And I said to people, Kevin, I feel like when I met you, that I met my soulmate. Like sometimes you just meet people and you're like, boom, I know they're going to be my friend. I know they're going to be in my life. Do you feel that way in your life and have those moments?
And I feel that way about you too. I feel the same way. So the feelings are mutual. I know you and I have been blessed to have an opportunity to meet a lot of people, to have a chance to spend time with a lot of people. And I often, say that there's some people that it's really difficult to even, you can't even get through a 30-minute meeting with them because you're already looking at the clock. And I remember even the first time that you and I had a chance to sit down, it went on probably much longer than planned. And even when it never really ended, we've been on a perpetual meeting since then. And so it's always a pleasure to spend time with people that I don't even say they feel like you've known for years, but you have known from a soul and spirit standpoint, and your passion and your love and your empathy and compassion about changing the narrative really touched my soul. And so I'm glad to be able to spend SUNDAYSoul with you today.
Kev, why get into the college game? You were breaking barriers. You were doing great things in the professional game. Why even step your toe into the college game?
Yeah, I mean, I think really what I think people are realizing the more time they spend with me, it really wasn't about, and it never has been about sports. My life has been in the sports arena, as a athlete and from a career standpoint. But my real passion has been about people. And I just felt after, even when the call came in from the Big Ten to be able to sit down and we called it wasn't an interview. It was really a discussion to be able to discuss, because I, made it very clear that I'm not really interested in interviewing for jobs. Yeah. I had the best job in all of pro sports working at the Minnesota Vikings, but I'm interested in discussing, opportunities with people. And I think the difference of why from the Vikings to the Big Ten is really, I just felt from a platform standpoint, although I was able to touch in a positive manner a lot of young men and a lot of young women at the Vikings. But if you think about the number of student athletes in the Big Ten, we have almost 10,000 student athletes in the Big Ten from an Olympic sports standpoint and from a football and basketball standpoint, but 10,000. And so just from an everyday standpoint, was I able to touch 60 to 70 men at the Vikings? Yes, between our active roster and injured reserve and practice squad. But to think that every day that I wake up, that I had an opportunity to touch 10,000 student athletes, both men and women. And that was the other thing that was really, I was passionate about, is to be able to expand that footprint to touch, both men and women. And so when I looked at it, it wasn't that it was the Big Ten Conference and it wasn't the television network opportunities. It was the fact of going into the position and be able to take all of these different things, so many of which that you and I have shared our hearts about, to be able to go and impact so many different people.
You come from a long line of impactors. I've watched a video about your grandfather, Morrison Warren, and by the end of it, Kev, I'm like in tears.
Right.
This is amazing. If you will share a little bit, I think it's so even more so needed in today's society where we are. We've taken a lot of strides, but we still need a lot of healing. If you will tell me a little bit about your grandfather and coming from this line of people who couldn't help but change the world.
Yeah, I mean, so when you look at the Warren family, and it starts back in Marlin, Texas, and my grandfather was I would say a business person, but really a farmer, but there. And and it was interesting how my family transitioned to Arizona, and then what he was able to kind of hand down through to my dad and to my siblings and to me was that sense of compassion, empathy, hard work, and to do things for the right reason. And so when you look at all the different things that my family has been able to I don't even say accomplish, to really influence. And being my brother Morrison was one of the first scholarship football student athletes at Stanford. And the stories that I hear, I still get when I say I get emotional about it, not from a sad standpoint, but just from a strength standpoint. And to think that he had a scholarship, at Stanford from Phoenix, in 1961. And but when he had the scholarship, he ended up having to take the Greyhound bus from Phoenix to Palo Alto because we didn't have the family resources for him to go and to fly there. And then for him to go there and be off to a fast start and be doing well football, and had a great freshman year, and then end up starting off a good sophomore year, then tearing his ACL. You can imagine if you tore your ACL in the early 60s,
yeah,
his career was over. And he was one of these people that was destined, if you read all the articles and what people said, to play professionally. One, that he had the IQ and he had the EQ, but to go up there as a dual threat student athlete, but then tear his ACL. But then what great makes the story great about my brother is that most people, if that happened, they would have left. And you're at an academic institution like Stanford that's very challenging. He ended up graduating still in 4 years. I think there were only 6 Black students on the entire campus.
Wow.
And one was from Africa. So to be there away from home, not a lot of family resources, and to tear your ACL and to lose out on your dream and still graduate in 4 years. And then when he graduates, he goes and volunteers to go fight in Vietnam. And so it's a great story. My mom and dad and even my brother tells that he ends up volunteering to go fight for our country in Vietnam, and then ends up wrenching that same knee. And while he was in there getting checked out, he had a Stanford class ring on, and the doctor who was volunteering happened to be from Stanford also. Wow. And asked my brother, who gave you that ring? And he ends up saying, who gave it to me? I earned it. And that's how he ended up getting an honorable discharge, as he said, you don't need to be, here. But how my mom would always talk about Romans 8:28, that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called to his purpose, is, my brother, the injury, which was devastating, that, ruined a potentially prosperous NFL career, but it was the thing that really ended up saving, his life. And then you look at my dad being one of the early scholarship student athletes in Arizona, and administrator at Arizona State, and then working to be the first Black man to lead a bowl game, to be president of the Fiesta Bowl in 1982, and a lot of the things he had to deal with racial issues. So I say that to say that I have just learned. I feel like I'm at that age in my mid-50s where I really am straddling both kind of what's going on in the new age. I can still relate to some of the issues that are going on here, but being this age and being born in early 60s and having older parents, is that my mindset kind of reaches all the way almost from the 20s through World War II, through Vietnam to the current era, because of the time that I was born and raised. And so I was blessed to grow up in a family that was real, that didn't kind of shade the realities of life, that we talked about them. And even in the last couple of days, my wife and I, during this pandemic, I've watched more Netflix. I had never watched Netflix before this COVID time period. Wow. But we've always tried to carve out, so we got a chance we got through all 3 seasons of Ozark, but we saw some great documentaries on Quincy Jones, which was unbelievable, and Miles Davis. But the last couple of nights we watched this 6-show episode on Who Killed Malcolm X. And why it was so powerful is that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad grew up right across the street from us in Phoenix, because he had emphasis lived in Chicago, but he lived in Phoenix. And they showed on the screen, and I actually took a picture of it 2 nights ago. Malcolm X was writing a letter to Elijah Muhammad, basically after he had been suspended from the Nation of Islam, asking for forgiveness to get back in. And it had 2118 East Violet Drive. Well, the house I grew up in was 2131 East Violet Drive. And to see that on the screen of this, they had a copy of the letter. And so fortunately, I say this, Rachel, that I was blessed to be around history, some good, some not so good, but to be around history and understand, you know, the importance of being around good people like you, listening to your gut. And back to what you asked about why the Big Ten, when you have a chance to go and change the world and make it a better place, just like what you're doing with changing the narrative, you got to go do it.
This is a crazy question, but you and I are big dreamers. What can a college commissioner, one that dreams as big as you do, what can they teach the world about better race relations from all perspectives? We're not just talking about just black and white. We're talking about brown and Jews and you know, and all right, any sort of racism. What can a college commissioner do to change the landscape in terms of ending racism?
I mean, it's a wonderful question. Is that if you look at some of my core pillars, they all have something to do just with people making the world a better place, and none of them have anything to do with winning championships. So there are a lot of times people would ask me, so if you look at number one, you know, educate and empowering our student athletes, and under that rubric is voter registration and mental health and wellness and financial wellness and literacy. You know, that's all about taking care of our student athletes. And then you think about, you know, so those kind of areas, none of my core pillars have anything to do with, you know, the next one is capturing the hearts and minds of our fans. You know, making sure we're taking care of our fans. The next one is building relationships with all of our constituents. We have 166 Fortune 500 companies in the Big Ten footprint. You know, the last one is making sure we're financially strong so we can do all these things. But nowhere on the core pillars that it says we need to win X number of national championships. Now, does it talk about graduation rates? Yes. Are we exploring the disparity between people in color and non-people of color? Yes. But so to answer your question, what can we do as a conference commissioner is just what we're talking about, is making sure that we deal with those, you know, issues. Because when you start getting the mental health and wellness, I don't say here's a mental health and wellness platform, you know, if you're a white, you know, swimmer, or if you're a black football player. This is a mental health and platform for our student athletes, you know, and our coaches and our administrators. Or if this is a financial wellness or literacy program, it's for everyone. Or when I talk about voter registration, I'm not just talking about for non-people of color, people of color. I mean, our student athletes need to understand what it means to register to vote and the power of the vote. And so if you really peel back the covers on all of the things that I'm passionate about that we're putting forth at the Big Ten Conference, it deals with building people and making people better. And then when you do that, it quite naturally overcomes racism.
Well, you know, you've got my heart and stole it from the first time I met you, but you've been so outspoken and so pronounced and so vocal about mental health. And, you know, listen, I just had somebody ask me today, you know, kind of what is your movement all about? And I said, listen, until you have good love for yourself, you can't have good love for anybody else. Till you fix what we call funky junk, you can't, nothing else is going to work well until you fix this and what's inside here. So just a big bravo to you, my friend, for stepping out and embracing that. And it caught the media by storm. You were all over. I took a bunch of pictures, watched all the interviews, and was so very proud of you for taking a stand, because here's the reality. Because of your work, and I share the same space, right? So I get it, but because of your work, there's somebody out there that's going to feel less alone and is not going to take their life. There's going to be somebody out there that chooses to seek professional help, and because it's less stigmatized, it's destigmatized, it's normalized through the work you're doing, and you already are saving and changing lives. That's a fact.
You know, that was the whole point of it is, and I said it from day one. You know, we provided the Calm app to every one of our Big Ten student athletes, our coaches, administrators in the Big Ten. And people ask me, you know, why did you do that? It's interesting. Sometimes when you talk to individuals, they want to always go to the cost. You know, how much did it cost? I said it's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is is that you tell me what a life is worth.
Mm.
And if there's, so no matter what we paid for it, and that's why I was so adamant about that we did pay for it, that I didn't want to do a sponsorship program with Calm where they gave it to us for free and then we gave it away, because to me, that would cheapen the value of a life. I wanted to actually, for the conference to pay for it, because when you start asking yourself, whatever we pay for, it is far less than what the value of a life is. Yeah. And when we take on every one of our student athletes, it really is in loco parentis. We have a responsibility to take care of them. And me having a son who's a current student athlete at Mississippi State University in the Southeast Conference, every time he goes back to school, right, wrong, or indifferent, I have an expectation that those coaches there, although this staff there wasn't there who recruited him, and unfortunately he's on his third staff, but even the coaches there who coach him, that they have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of my son, just like if he were their son or grandson or whatever the case may be. That means to encourage him when he needs encouragement, to discipline him, when he needs disciplining, and because I've trusted him to take care of them. And I just want to make sure that all the moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and siblings know that if you come to a Big Ten school, we're going to do everything within our power to put money to the side to make sure that we do everything we can to take care of our student athletes, and also, which I know take care of our coaches. And that's a forgotten group that we need to make sure that we continually give more love and respect to.
I mean, you've got grand plans, coaches, fans, staff, players, trainers. I mean, it's really voluminous, and I'm so excited about the future.